Reminder of our question of the day, because that's basically what we are interacting about, and we want to find out, do you support the bringing down of those salaries for our senior civil servants right here in Kenya? Now, to have this conversation with me this morning is a political analyst, Bernard Wakoli. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning
First of all,
Mike.
yes, first of all, your comments and your thoughts on generally what the Sarah Serem team has come up with.
Okay, looking at the views and what Sarah Serem has done, I think it sounds good in the ears of many Kenyans. But I also want to maybe argue that when you are reviewing salaries, you need to review upwards. You don't review downwards. But
No, but you see, for the civil servants.
because of the what has been going on in terms of the wage bill, and and also in comparable with the cost of living, I think the review as done by the Sarah Serem Commission is good.
It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Now, I'm sure for many Kenyans, it sounds like it is good. But let us know, why is it good? What benefit is it for me and you at the end of the day?
Okay. Personally, I wouldn't like to give it so much credit, because what we are suffering, what the country is suffering, or what the country is going on, is what the country is suffering from, is what I might call lack of, systematic review, and the lack of, committed civil servant. Because when you look at the general overview of the figures, you realize that the cut is between 200, 100, from the highest paid civil servant.
Although with like members of parliament, you have a whooping 400,000, 445,000 to be precise.
Yeah, averagely.
Yeah.
And you realize that Kenya is one of the countries with the highest wage or salary disparities. The highest earning person earns so much, and the lowest earning person earns very little. So also, I think the Sarah Serem Commission should look at ways in which they should bridge the gap between the highest earner and the lowest earner. And when you look at the system itself, there have been cases of so many ghost workers. And these ghost workers, if the system is cleaned to rid off the menace of ghost workers, then we are going to save so much money. You remember when Waiguru was Minister for Devolution, she really tried to come up with a way of cleaning the system, to clean off the
get rid of
ghost workers. And the audit, just in as little as 2 months, 3 months, there were so many people who had discovered there were ghost workers. And this spreads across from the government, central government, to the county government. County government inherited the workers from the former county council government. There have never been a serious audit of those people to identify who are real workers and who are not. So as much as we might want to reduce the salaries of the highest earners, I think it's also prudent to look at the menace of ghost workers.
All right. Now, the other thing that the Sarah Serem team was tasked to do is to ensure that there's some kind of balance and sanity. Like you've mentioned, the top earners and the low earners in the civil society, the civil servants, is very huge. Is this likely to weigh into now those who possibly are under the bracket in terms of low earners to be brought up, so that there's a bit of balance?
Mike, there's a problem in Kenya, because when you look at the general wage and salary provisions, you realize that the Sarah Serem Commission was created. One of the responsibilities was to ensure that the public service becomes attractive, and they attract the highest, the brightest minds. But when you look at public service, most people go there to enrich themselves, to loot, such kind of things. So it is very important that the Commission looks at the formal employment sector, because as we speak now, the formal employment, which is quality employment, caters for only 19% of the general labor market. And most of the employment goes to informal sector, which is catering to over almost 81% of the general labor force. So when you look at those disparities, you realize that then most low earners are generally in the informal sector. And most people in the formal sector are either unemployed or, people are not secure about their jobs. And, there's always tension. So wherever you get opportunity, you want to enrich yourself as a safety net, so that by the time your job is over, then you have something.
You have a fallback. Now, what do you think would be the impact and the effect of this move by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission on the economy and the GDP? Is it likely to affect?
Yeah, it will affect generally, because as we speak, we are being told that the cut will accumulate to around 8 billion reduction. But also we are not forgetting that early this year or late last year, early this year I think so, the government increased salaries for some civil servants, and the increment was up to a tune of 134 billion. So when you subtract 8 from 134, you realize that the wage bill is still very high.
Still very high.
Yeah, so the remedy for this catastrophe that Kenya is facing at the moment, I think, is to have a serious audit of the public service from both the central and the county governments.
Okay. We'll come to whether this can be amended, because, of course, we're expecting that the members of parliament will probably not take this sitting. They'll probably want to fight back and look at those aspects, but also to look at a different impact of this, because those who are campaigning, of course, are using a lot of money right now, and some of them are hoping to get it back through maybe their salaries when they get back to work. Now, once we have the 12th parliament sit, is this likely to fuel corruption, for example? Because they need to get their money back somehow.
Yeah, sure. I think, Mike, when you look at the Kenya, the Salary and Remuneration Commission, the way it's set up, we always say that it's one of the independent commissions that were established under Article 230 of the current constitution. But how independent are these independent commissions? You have seen over time and again, some of these commissions being, having external influence. And we don't know what has actually influenced SRM to take such an action. It could be because of politics, and because when the president was in parliament last time addressing the nation, he mentioned that he's going to ensure that, there's low wage bill. And it has come at a time when the country is just pregnant, the country is is facing general election, and here we have the cuts. So is it just because we are facing election, or is something that is going to be sustained in the long term? Then apart from politics, you know very well that parliamentarians have always fought the idea of their salaries or packs being reduced. And we are seeing the 12th parliament, when they resume, that will be the first agenda. And laws are made in parliament. Anything can be amended in parliament. And when it comes to salaries and packs of members of parliament,
they normally sing in one voice.
Unite and sing in one voice. And one thing that I fear about the cuts is on the issue of corruption, because Kenyans are used to identify and respect those who have so much. Now, when you look at what's going on, the campaigns that are going on, these members of parliament are using some huge amounts of money. Some of them have borrowed from the banks, and they will want to repay back the money. So the problem is, as much as we might celebrate that the cuts have come down, but you realize that it will create a loophole for corruption now, because people want to recover what they have spent, and also they will wish to remain afloat. You don't want to see a parliamentarian who is broke. You want to see a parliamentarian who is driving,
huge cars, and that's the impression that they have given us. Yeah. But is this cast in stone? Is there a way that it can be reversed once the 12th parliament sits?
Sure, as much as we are told by the SRM Commission that the figures and the said remunerations have been gazetted. But I think, as I've said earlier, laws are made in parliament. Everything can be recalled in parliament, anything. And I'm seeing once the 12th Parliament resume, that will be the first item on the order paper to look into the reviewed and set remuneration. And you don't want to forget that we have the Parliamentary Service Commission, which also has the mandate generally of looking into the payments and salaries, allowances of members of parliament and staff. So there could be a conflict of interest between Sarasarem Commission and the Parliamentary Service Commission, which of course, both of them are commissions.
So, what would it take, though, to reverse her decision or what has already been presented? To take Parliament to sit and agree on it, then come up with laws against it?
What I'm seeing, once the 12th Parliament resumes, members of Parliament will bring up a motion to look into their welfare. They bring it as a welfare kind of an idea or a kind of debate. So, of course, they will debate over it and agree that the recommendation by the Sarasarem, as far as their commission is concerned, should be looked into by the Parliamentary Service Commission. Because all over, once we have heard them saying that they only recognize the employer is the Parliamentary Service Commission and not the Sarasarem Commission. So those are the kind of challenges that we face as a country in terms of coming up with the laws and procedures to guide us for future development.
All right. Now, looking at one of the things that has been amended in this recommendation is the issue of sitting allowances and also claims. And one of the figures that she mentioned is a claim that had been made even for more than 1 million shillings. Some of the claims are actually more than the salary. So, of course, how are these members of parliament expected to get by?
Okay, when you look at those claims, especially the mileage claim, there have been cases of fraudulent, some fraudulent members of parliament who make claims
even without sitting. Sometimes they're absent and
not really sitting. The mileage of those MPs who are paid because of going to their constituencies. We have had cases, media has reported cases where some MPs have made claims of huge sums of money without really traveling. They're just in Nairobi here, but at the end of the day, they submit receipts, those kind of things, and claim a lot of money. So, as a country, we have gone so low in terms of our moral value to an extent that even our leaders always think of stealing from us, from the common mwananchi. And when you look at the allowances, the sitting allowances, and Sarah Sarem was talking about standing allowance and walking allowances. you are paid actually a salary. Me, I'm paid to be in my office, and I don't request for any allowance.
You don't have to be paid for anything that you participate in that adds value to your job.
To my job, because members of parliament are paid to legislate. That's the salary. But now, why are you again being paid for going to sit in that seat of legislating? Those are some of the questions that have been, so lingering in the minds of many Kenyans. And, then there are these committees that where members of parliament go and sit and make, you get one member of parliament sitting in more than even 5 committees. He's moving from here to there to there. And in all those committees, they're accumulating money. So at the end of the day, his salary is not, does not bring so much value apart from these
so actually the allowances and sitting allowances is what makes
the perks have been so huge to an extent that they don't even look at the salaries. In fact, most of the MPs and people in those salary categories, most of them have committed their salaries. They have taken loans to build, to do their development projects. So they entirely depend on these allowances.
All right, now as we wind up, looking at where now Kenyan members of parliament are probably the most well-paid or among the most well-paid in the world. Does this kind of give us a better or rather a more average pay on our MPs, or do they still remain part of the highest?
Comparatively, in East Africa, Kenyan MPs are still high despite the cuts. Also globally, they're among the best 10 paid legislators. And I think the review should still be affected. And the Saras Rem, what she has done is the right move.
It's a good start.
The right start. And I think there's more that need to be done in terms of ensuring that the payments and perks for our legislators is in tandem with the other, MPs, regional and globally, so that we don't. Kenya is a growing a growing economy. Kenya is not a developed economy where you see an MP, living very extreme, while the rest of the Kenyans are living very low. And so I think Saras Rema has done the right move. But as I said in the beginning, generally, although what she has done is retrogressive, I think salaries in any employment setting should be going up. And when you look at the economy and, inflation status and all the things that come in, because those are some of the things that maybe members of parliament might bring as an argument by saying that, you see, there's inflation, cost of living has gone high. Why are they now cutting our salaries? And there's so much demand in terms of their responsibilities and their constraints.
All right, thank you very much, Bernard Okoli, for joining us this morning for the Dawn Debate. And basically, that's just painting the picture of what the Sarah Serem team has come up with and what it means for you and I. This is where we wind up the Dawn Debate, but do stay with us right here on KTN News. We've got some news updates coming up. Then later on, we have a political point, and Michelle Ngele is going to be steering that particular section or segment of the show. But we have some news updates coming up. Then we get to the political point. Do stay with us.